Hello, K. Jolie, Crochet Basics, and in this episode we're assembling Candle Fox. So the pattern's available on my Etsy's, and even if you are not into candle and all that, take a look. I have tips and tricks and stuff like that. All of these assembling videos have tips and tricks in them and things. You know, you might want to try if you're learning how to do amigurumis and stuff like that. So in part one of this, we did her face. We put her face together. And we closed it up and we attached all the bits and bobs and things on her face, and we did the detailing. So in this episode, we're just going to put the body together with the legs and stuff like that and the belly patch, and then we'll work out the tail. All right. So let's get this going. So you should have your stuffing ready, all your pieces made and stuff like that. Your stuffing nearby because we're going to be stuffing and closing up all the pieces. Here's the body. And we'll go from there. Let's get this going. So you can start by stuffing the body, and then we'll attach it to the head. So I always leave my scrap yarn stitch marker until the end, just in case if I have to add another row or two or whatever it is. Sorry about the nails, but I meant to get them cut down, but I don't think the guy heard me when I said it. Anyway, so we'll stuff the body nice and full and attach it to the head. And then from there, we'll attach the arms and legs and the belly patch, and the tail is last. So these assembling videos are a little on the weird side because, like, not weird, but like I have to keep moving the pieces to sew them and everything proper. All right, and I use polyfill usually, but this time I have loops and thread classic fiber fill. So you want a looser filling, not so dense, because then it makes it hard to stuff it, to get the needle through and all of that when you're sewing the pieces on. So, but we'll stuff it there, and then we'll see how we're going to attach the head, and we'll go from there. Now I say about these, I love these. I got these off of Amazon, and they're all different. They come in their little carry case, and they're all different, got different bends in the tips of the needles. They're darning needles. And you can't always use the darning needles. Sometimes a yarn needle is better. A tapestry needle is better, because if the stitches are super tight, it makes it hard to, the darning needles have a wide hook, a wide eye, and sometimes it's hard to get that through the stitches. So you'll take your tail from the body that we left for sewing, you'll thread it on your needle, and we'll start attaching. So you want to see how you're going to place it on. And you'll have, before we completely seal up, you'll be able to get more stuffing in there. So, and it's funny, like it looks like one of those kids' toys, like it looks like a Weeble or something. But you'll see how you want it here. And make sure you center it as best as possible. And you'll start sewing it on. Now I like to sew it, I try and go underneath. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but I try more or less to not have like the stitches too far away from the base. And if you need to, if you have the pins with the big bobble head, you can stick a few in there just to keep the placement. as you're going. But make sure as you're sewing, you're checking your progress and keeping it centered straight down from the like the nose and the mouth and stuff. And then in the back, like between the ears. All right, the main body, you want the main body, that's where you want it. All right, so I'm just going to go around hooking in, and before I close up, I'll add more stuffing in, because all of these pieces, as you're sewing them together and stuff like that, the stuffing gets compacted down, and it takes away some of the fluff of the piece, or the like softness of the piece and everything with the shaping and all. So you want to keep a, you know, an eye on that. So as centered as possible. And make sure you catch it all the way around so that it's you don't get any spaces or gaps or any kind of thing. And you want to try and get it like as round as possible, like you don't want it to be pinched or squeezed on one side or anything like that. And I do love these darning needles with the different tips. And also the bright colors help too, because, you know, sometimes when you're using different different colored yarns and stuff like that, sometimes you can't see exactly where you're pulling through. So check your progress, because what happens is sometimes when you're sewing on this side, you're actually pushing the piece over, and you can end up sewing it a bit crooked. Sometimes I'll sew on both sides. In the Glarbin, with the Glarbin pattern, I think I said, like, you know, try, and even with the Kiff tail, I said, like, you know, if you feel like it's getting crooked or whatever, thread a needle and start sewing on the other side to keep it all in the middle, you know, which is kind of like a pain in the tushy, but it does help if you're having like your attachments getting crooked and stuff like that, or you think you're pushing too far on one side, because you are, you know, in a sense, you know, trying to in a sense, as you're sewing it, it is shifting and getting pushed over and such. Alright, so I have a little gap here, and I usually try, like, if I have a finger gap, really, space and stuff, to try and get more stuffing in, because it will, you know, get smashed down. We're sticking 2 arms on it, two legs and stuff like that, and a belly patch, and then the tail. So that's a lot of squeezing down while you're sewing and stuff like that. And also, this is a great time to check as you're getting the extra stuffing in to make sure that you got a nice good bond as you were sewing around, sewing the bottom of the head to the body, you know. And you'll have to reshape that anyway and go from there. Okay, I think that's about as much stuffing as I can get in there. So let me close this up. And hope I did a good job. And I'm sorry if I'm going like in and out of frame and stuff like that, but to sew these on I have to shift the pieces quite a bit. Okay. A little bit crooked, not terrible, not terrible. So what I do usually is when I end off, like sewing a bigger piece like this, is I try and go through like all the way to try and get like how you say, like strengthen it from a different way, not just like around the bottom edge and stuff. Not terrible. Okay. Alright, so from here, if you get a few extra stitches in, always perfect. Make sure it's nice and strengthened and stuff like that. You don't want, you want the reinforcement, more or less. So what I do from here is I'll go underneath, push it out through the center of a stitch, not in between a stitch, through the center of a stitch. Make a couple of knots, go right back in where I pulled it out from. Go right back in. Pull it out a few stitches over. Pull it tight. Pull that knot in. Pull that knot in. Pull it tight. And then snip off as close as you can get it without disturbing your stitches. And then that string will be sucked right back in and you don't have to worry about it. So we like that. So, not terrible. Alright, from here we'll do the arms and then the legs. And the last bit is the belly patch before we do the tail. Oh, the legs have feet also. Optional though. The feet are optional. Alright, so now I always tell you stuff as you go. But if you can't stuff as you go or you forget, because I like to say sometimes I usually don't stuff as I go because the stuffing gets all over the yarn and everything. So I use a nice pencil, use the eraser, it grabs onto the fibers and it pushes it down. But don't do giant like wads, do little puffs so that you get it all the way down to the base of whatever it is you're stuffing. Okay, you want it to go all the way, and if you do big globs, sometimes you'll get lumps up whatever it is you're stuffing, whether it's a leg or an arm or a tail or whatever. Alright, so something to keep in mind, but I do love using the pencil. I've been having good luck with it lately, getting it all the way down and all of that. So you want to stuff the legs nice and full, but not too stiff. And try not to mash up your stuffing. Now the legs you want stuffed to the top, but, and they are sewn on open. But, adjustments. If you want Candle to sit down, or any stuffed animal, whatever, to sit down, sew them more to the front. Either close them up and sew them more to the front, or just sew them more to the front, and eventually they'll bend. You know, the stuffing will loosen and they'll bend. You know, shift to the front, and then whatever your stuffed animal is, it will sit down. You know, now when I make these characters, I don't have a kid or whatever. Like, I'm not giving these to a kid. These I make them, I do the pattern, and go from there, you know. I'd like to donate them, actually, when I'm done. I'd like to donate them. And also I have a bunch of extras from when I make the pattern, because I usually have to make the pattern. I don't have a pattern checker, so I'm the one that has to check the pattern, so I make the pattern several times before I post it when it comes to these characters. So I usually have 2 or 3 laying around of these, and then I don't know what to do with them. Alright, I'm going to put these aside. These are the legs. I'm going to put them aside with the feet. Alright, let's move on to the arms. Actually, I'm stuffing the legs, but really the arms are the first thing that's going on to this body here. So you want them lightly stuffed, lightly stuffed. You don't want to jam a whole bunch of stuffing in there. What happens is if you overstuff, then the arms go straight out. They don't like hang to the side of the body. They'll end up straight, hanging straight out like a scarecrow. All right, so lightly stuffing, and then finish, I think it's 1 row that we pinch the front to the back just to close up the top of the arm, which makes it easier to sew to the body. I used to always overstuff my arms, and they would stick straight out. You know what? You live and you learn. And then you realize not to overstuff like that. So, but you don't want the stuffing, like you want it, you know, to end a little bit before where you're going to close up, so that it's not going to stick out, you know. And there's ways around like when it is sticking out and stuff like that. I have some lazy tricks for that. All right. So with this, where's my hook? Oh, okay. All right. So with this, you'll pinch the front to the back and you'll close it up. But you want to make sure that the thumb is to the front. Like the thumb is not on the, like when, you don't want it sealed on the side. You want it sealed where the thumb is like pointing out to an outside, so that it sits right when you attach it to the body. What the heck is happening here? I stuck my hook in wrong. Okay. Alright. Now it doesn't, like, we're sealing it up, but when you sew it, just makes it easier when you're sewing it to close it, because these, you're not sewing them open. Since we're sewing them on closed, it just makes it easier if you close it up first. Just make sure you got everything caught up and not a problem. And sometimes you have to go in and give like an extra stitch. So, alright, and then that'll be my sewing tail, and just not too full, because this is going to go on the body anyway. Like, it'll like hug the body. So you'll repeat that for the other arm. You'll repeat the same thing. Stuffing and getting ready to sew. And whenever you have two of anything, like two legs, two tails, two eyes, or whatever, always put them next to each other before finishing off so that you know that they match up, you know. Because for some reason, whenever I do like arms and legs, I always, for some reason, have one a little bit longer. Mostly because I think when I'm making the first one, I'm like nervous about it. And then when I make the second piece, I'm more relaxed and I'm not pulling as tight. Or vice versa, you know. I always think that. Okay. Now we'll close that one up too. And then we'll start attaching. Okay. Now this one's tricky. You don't want the arms too low and you don't want them too high because the belly patch. So what you can do is you can line up your belly patch. Sorry, I got all my bits and bobs sitting here waiting to do this. Alright, here's the top of the belly patch and here's the bottom. Now the belly patch comes underneath. It doesn't start high. It comes underneath, you know, or not, you know, but I'm showing you, telling you, okay? So that's where the belly patch is going to go. So what you want to do here is make sure you line up your arms. The arms come a little bit lower, more or less they wrap around the belly. Okay, so wait. All right, so this was the first one. Well, first of many really, but this was the first completed one and how it comes down. This is bigger than that one. This is bigger than the final pattern. This was, I resized it because I'm a silly goose. Anyway, so see how there's several rows up here and then from the top of the belly patch, you got, it's like right in the middle with the arms. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go from there. And when you're doing the arms, you want to, once you get the first one in place, you're going to follow it over. And then it's like I'll always, whenever possible, but make sure it lines up, you know, so that your arms are not crazy. All right, but the belly patch is later, but you can always pin it. Now, I don't normally, like I've said for years, I don't normally use the pins with the big, you know, I don't use regular pins. I found these on, these are corsage pins because I couldn't find the other pins. I see other crafters with big bobbleheads, bright colors. And I don't know where to get those. I looked all over Amazon. I've looked in several craft stores and I couldn't seem to find them. So I bought these. They're 2-inch corsage pins. And then I just painted the tips different colors, the bobble different colors, so that I'd be able to see them in different yarns. Because I have left needles pinned in before and stabbed myself, or have gotten stabbed. All right, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think around row 5 is where you're going to want to go because the hands, the arms are supposed to be longer than the body. So around row 5 or row 6 is where you're going to sew it on. And you want to follow the chin, like the chin patch, like you want to try and line it up as best as possible, just so that you know it's like even and in the middle. And I don't know if I can use this one or I have to pull out a different one. So thumbs facing forward. Thumbs facing forward. And I like to more or less go underneath and just catch the very top here. But it's lined up. And then I'll go in again and, you know, make sure it's all set right. Put a few extra stitches to reinforce and all of that kind of thing. And you want the stitches as close to the arm as possible, even though it's all the same color. Sometimes if you got like a rogue stitch a little further away, it could cause a problem. Like it could wear out on its own type of situation. So that's my first arm, and it is, it looks a little stiff, but it's not so stiff. Now, if this project, any project, if you overstuff the arm and you got a scarecrow going on, lazy tip, lazy trick, okay? You can just go straight through here, go across, come back out, and more or less secure the arm lower down to the body, which is what I would do, because I used to I'm telling, I kid you not, I used to always overstuff my arms. I used to, well, I still do every now and then, but I make dolls, you know, not just characters or whatever. Like I would make amigurumi like dolls and stuff. And I would totally overstuff. Because, like, I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? So I would be like, I'm stuff. Okay. Alright, so that's pretty secure. Looking good. All the way across. Alright. Always put in a few extra stitches. Just for good measure. Especially if you're giving this to a kid, because kids do the things. They do the things that loosen the arms and stitches. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing I did. Pull it through a couple of stitches over, make a knot, and then get it sucked back in. I feel like, all right, good stuff. So I'm just going to go underneath to the back, pull it through the middle. Not in between a stitch, in the middle of a stitch. Make a couple of knots, feed it back through, cut off. Pull the knot in. Okay. So what you'll do is you'll follow this arm across. So you'll take it and you'll follow it across. So you follow the top of this row, straight across, and you can pin it, of course. Just use a bright color so that you can see it. Okay? And you'll sew the second one in place, and then we'll move on to the legs and the belly patch. Okay, so my second arm is on. So just to show you from the bottom, because we didn't put the legs on or anything yet, but the head is kind of too big to show you, the aerial view, all right? But just make sure they line up as best as possible and all of that, and then we'll move on. I can't remember if I did the legs first or the belly patch first. When you do that underneath, and even when you're sewing, when an item is already stuffed, you want to be careful not to go through the stuffing too much, or be careful not to like pick it up, because you will pull the stuffing, the needle will shove the stuffing right out through the pieces. Alright, I think we're going to do the legs first, and the feet are optional with this one because her feet are so small. Alright, but you want to line up where you want your feet to be, and try and line them up where the arms are, where the center is. Okay? Alright, so stuffed full, you can, as you're sewing, you can always get a little bit more stuffing in before you close up. But the legs are sewn on open. But if you want her sitting, close the leg, sew it more to the front. But if you're going to do that, sew the belly patch first. Okay? So that it's not in the way. But for me, she's going to be standing because the other ones that I made are all standing. So this one's going to be standing too, because these are display. Now these are, it's a little hard sewing like with the legs and then sewing the belly patch because it's such tight proximity, like, you know, they're sewn on super close to each other. So it does make it hard to get all the stitches where they should be. But the feet on last kind of makes it easier, if you, optional if you do the feet, but the feet on last, so that you know that they're facing forward and not, you know, you didn't sew the leg on a little crooked or whatever. Make sure you got a good attachment, that you went through all of the stitches and the leg is fully attached around the entire top of the leg. Alright, and then you'll follow the same for the second leg. Alright, so after your legs are in place, hopefully they're as even as possible, straight down the center, hopefully. And I'm not the best sewer, I always say that, and I really don't even like sewing on camera, because, I mean, it's yarn, it's harder to go through and all of that kind of thing. Alright, so we'll put the belly patch in place, and it goes down underneath, it goes lower. So you can pin it if you like. Make sure you like where you have it, more or less, like it feels like it's even and stuff like that. And in the center, mine could be shifted over a little bit. And if you like, or you know, you can get a little stuffing underneath the belly patch before you close up, if you feel, because again, when you're moving the pieces, they squish down and the stuffing gets like dense and stuff. So you want to, you know, make sure that everything is looking good wherever it's supposed to be. Okay. So I left a nice long tail. You want to make sure you catch every stitch so that you got a nice bond and there's no gaps or any kind of thing like that in the belly patch itself, because it can, if you get a gap, it could warp, or like, that's what I mean, like it could end up sticking out over time and not lay flat. So that's what I mean by that. So, okay. Okay, and then you just want to go all the way around. Trying to catch it as close to the patch as possible, and be careful as you're sewing, because what happens is you can pull the patch over and end up sewing it crooked or misshapen. So if you end up coming out too far over and then trying to compensate for that, you can end up being all misshapen. I know, because I do it all the time. It's a thing. Alright, so I'm going to sew this and then I'll meet you back. And you can always use your, if you have a starting tail, you can always use that to anchor it in place, just to make sure it's where you want it and all the things. And check your progress as you go, so you can see if you're uneven and all of that. So as you're sewing, make sure you're checking your progress and all of that. And again, at the end, or not the very end, but if you wanted to get stuffing under the belly patch, you know, do that before you close up. And make sure you disperse it evenly, like make sure you get it all the way over and stuff like that. And it is a pain in the neck sewing the belly patch after the legs and the arms and everything, because you get hooked on the legs or the arms, you know. But check your progress as you go. Make sure it's how you like it and all of this kind of thing. And it's exactly where you want it to be. I like getting the stuffing underneath the belly patch, but then I also know once I do, I have a tendency to start sewing the patch on crooked while trying to, you know, to compensate for the stuffing. And if you do feel uneven, thread another and just work, you know, a few stitches on this and a few stitches on that. Because it being bunched up on the bottom is not going to be too big of a deal, but if it's bunched up on the sides or on the top, then it's going to be so noticeable, you know what I mean? So just something to keep in mind. That's what I did with Glarbin when I was sewing his head. Just to keep his head even, I sewed a little on one side and a little on the other side. Because it is kind of hard to sew these things even. You know, it shifts. It's yarn. Even when you pin it, it's yarn. It moves. It's not tight fabric or something, you know? But stuffing optional under the belly patch. So just to see, I'm not leaving that there, but just to check and see that I caught all of it. And not terrible. It's such a big head. Alright, so not terrible. Hopefully yours came out just as good, if not better, you know. I do have a gap here. So I do have a little gap there. So what I'm going to do, because I have a little gap, I'm just going to feed the needle underneath to get it over and close up that little gap that I gave my belly here. Okay. Now I'm just putting it through here, and then after it's where I want it, then I'm going to go underneath the orange or into the body itself and pick that up, because, again, I'm not really a great sewer or anything. I get by, but I do have tricks for stuff to make sure, you know, that it looks right. Alright, and then we'll move on to the feet, and the feet are optional. Okay. Good stuff, good stuff. Alright. And when you stuff the belly, if you choose to stuff the belly or whatever, it just makes it like protrude more, of course, you know. But it also can help round out the piece if you're having a problem with that, but it does make it harder to attach all the way around. So just an FYI on that. Although it's optional, you know, it has its pros and cons, of course. Alright, now let's move on to the feet. And if you get a little, like, you can always just use the needle if you get a little indent from doing the knotting that way. Okay. Alright, here's the feet. They're very small. They're very small. So this is what we've got so far. And she needs to be adjusted, of course, because of her stuffing and everything. But that's okay. Alright, with the feet, they go on to the very, very front, as close to the bottom as you can get it with it still being, you know, in front. And then just a smidgen of stuffing, a tiny little bit of stuffing, just to keep the toes fluffy. Alright, so you want it right in front. As in front as possible. Check your progress. Always check your progress while you're sewing in case you have to adjust and all of that. Now on this I had to use the smaller needle because the darning needles won't go through because it's such tiny stitches on the bottom of the feet. Okay, so right here I'm just going to get a tiny little bit of stuffing in there. Just a tiny little ball before I close up the foot. And you can always go push sideways in with the needle. You want more surface, that's why I use the side. Like, that's not a lot of surface, just going straight in is not a lot of surface. But if you go to the side, and just be careful with the, you know, because you could think it's straight and then it's not straight. Your foot is actually to the side or something, you know. Alright, so I was out of frame. But you'll repeat that for the second foot. Make sure you got good attachment and all of that. And just a tiny little bit of stuffing, you know, not too big of a deal. Whoop. Took that right off. Okay then. Alright, so then you'll do the second foot and then we're done with this part. Okay, and then we'll move on to the tail. Alright. Alright, so with that being said, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. As always, happy hooking because it keeps you off the streets and keeps you looking super cool. And I'll be back real soon with my next video. And look out for part 3. Keep an eye out for part 3, which is the tail. Candle's tail. I'm going to show you how to work it up and all of that. And how to attach it. Alright, and thank you so much. Have a super great day. K. Jolie, Crochet Basics. Assembling candle. Fox fan art. Have a great day. Bye. Ciao.